All right, everyone, welcome back. There's been a lot of discussion about the AI bubble and what it means and what the ramifications are and what the differences are now. And I want to explain a little bit about that and also give some of my predictions about where the industry is heading. So to begin, this stage that we're at first glance doesn't sound all that different. You have a new technology like we had in the dot-com bubble and we had in social media when it first started coming out, that and when cell phones started coming out, that you have enormous amount of capital pumped into these startups and into these businesses with very little revenue. Amazon started that way. Facebook started that way. So at first glance, they are losing money. Just seems to be on par with what we've seen in the past. So it's important to note that the AI bubble is radically different, and let me explain why. So let's talk about the big players from the perspective of the big players and from the perspective of small apps that are using the underlying big player APIs to run their businesses. So firstly, let's use Amazon as the example. So Amazon, we all know, was not profitable for years. Now, why weren't they profitable? So it wasn't that they were ever selling a book for less than the book was worth. It was a scalability problem. They needed to invest money in warehouses and shipping and infrastructure and data centers and engineers, and that needed to scale before it became profitable. So now Amazon is very profitable because they've scaled, right? They have their centers, they have distribution centers, they have their software. So everything at scale is enormously profitable. Look at Google, for instance. Google has Google search is enormously profitable. Why? Because each user that searches something doesn't really cost the money much more, a company much more. They have their own data centers, they have their own software that works, that's running. They're not spending enormous amounts of R&D on that software. So now at scale, they're enormously profitable. Now, here comes the essential difference with AI, which is why it is such an interesting problem. AI itself, just to run the AI processing, is not profitable yet. What do I mean by that? Meaning the cost to create the models gets extreme. It gets more and more expensive, and not in a linear way. ChatGPT 5 was orders of magnitude more expensive to create than ChatGPT 4. So just creating it costs billions. And again, all the big companies are in a space race here, an arms race. So they're all spending this money just to stay ahead. So that is burning an enormous amount of cash. The other thing that is enormously expensive is the chips that cost to run AI. And they're constantly running at high capacity. Generating a video is the same amount of power as powering a smartphone. It's extremely expensive. Then generating AI, generating any icon, speech, like a speech and text and images is also very expensive. Now, even the big companies, some of them do not have their own data centers. You say, look, like OpenAI. OpenAI is using other companies, Cisco and Microsoft and the likes for their data. Now, what's extremely troubling is that the cost of the product right now is not profitable. Which is, comparing it to something like, say, Amazon, the cost of the book was never not profitable. But here, the cost of the actual AI is not profitable, and it also doesn't scale because with, say, something like the Google search. So the more it goes up, the less each query costs. But that doesn't apply to AI. Each time you're running an AI query, you're actually costing the company real money. So the big players essentially have not figured out how to make this profitable yet. Now, what about the small players? It's way worse for them. Because most AI startups today just using third-party models, like they're using the OpenAI model or the Gemini model, and they're switching between. So you say, hey, what's the big deal? That's how many successful startups are doing the same thing. Take a look at, say, something like Uber. Uber, at its core, is a wrapper around Google Maps. At least at the beginning of the company, it did much of its work by using the Maps API. But that, again, because those APIs are relatively inexpensive, and at scale, it's certainly profitable to pay Google that money and then to get paid for the service. But what these many companies now are just like a slightly different version of what Google and OpenAI essentially offer. So, you have like these like video generation tools. They're all not profitable. They're catastrophically not profitable because they're just using underlying models and they're not getting a discount. Like if you go on say Gemini right now and you look at the pricing for or OpenAI, the Sora model or the Flow model, it costs more for API usage than it does just to use the product. And the other problem is that Google Google and OpenAI are producing good products. Grok, I don't want to leave out Grok. They're producing their own UIs that produce these images. Nana Banana just killed any really competition which was released by Google. Nana Banana, which was released by Google, basically destroys the need for any other image generation software. And you'll say, oh well, there's always startups that come up. Yeah, but the startups are just using the underlying models, so they're not really offering anything. And that even more so for video. So what you have here is a bubble. And if I could short every small AI contender, I would, because I just can't see how they're going to make money. The big companies will have to figure out how to get energy costs down. And so what you're already seeing is Google and Microsoft and OpenAI signing, and Cisco signing deals with nuclear reactors, trying to build gas-powered data centers, and they're all dealing with this problem, and they're plunging enormous amount of money into it. And so the time will tell. But I think in my prediction is that Google will come out on top. I know Google was behind at the beginning, but now Google's ahead. I use Google for both code generation, text, and video, and they're just as good, if not better, than anything OpenAI has to offer. And Google controls their own chips and has their own cloud infrastructure, so they're ahead in that regard. And I just don't see how any other company could beat them. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think what you're going to see is a huge energy boom, and I think you're going to see Google coming out on top on many of the AI features. And I think what you're going to see is either like we're seeing a possibility of ads showing up in AI, or what's more likely is that people are going to have to start paying the real costs. Once the big AI companies don't need the user anymore to learn from the user, so then they're going to have to be able to generate revenue from those users. So there's a lot to talk about in this topic, but that's the basic idea of the bubble. And I hope to talk about AI more on the show. Till next time, have a good one.